Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Krier created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Krier, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. I am so excited about my guest today. It's always so much fun when I get to interview my friends, especially because I have friends who are expert in subject matter, and just it is such a delight to be able to have them share their wisdom with everyone. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bill Lampton to our program today. Welcome, Dr. Bill. How are you?
I am doing great. How can I do better? I have you as a friend and a host, and now all of a sudden, with the many viewers and listeners that you host, and you've done that for more than 1,000 times, I'm getting to know them and as well. So it's a great privilege to be here.
Great. Well, I know they will be just as delighted with you as I am. So let me tell folks a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. Bill Lampton, Ph.D., joins us from just up the road in Gainesville, Georgia. Known as the Biz Communication Guy, he earned his Ph.D. in speech communication from Ohio University. He then taught at the University of Georgia before serving as a higher education vice president, where he applied his extensive communication theory daily. He then became a professional speaker, speech coach, and communication consultant. His top-tier client list includes the Missouri Bar, Oceania Cruises, University of Georgia Athletic Association, Ritz-Carlton Cancun, now that would have been a fun one, PGA and Gillette. His most requested motivational speech, always push the up button. He also hosts a weekly podcast, the Biz Communication Show, and I was absolutely delighted to be a guest on that program and so honored. So we'll have a link to that program in our show notes too. So please join me again in welcoming Dr. Bill to our program. Welcome, Dr. Bill. How are you? We asked that, but how the heck are you again?
I am doing great. Thank you for that gracious introduction. And you being a guest on my program was what got us acquainted. And I was so thrilled to learn that your communication skills are definitely used for the good of others. You take what you've gone through as a cancer patient and you bring empathy and education and hand-holding and uplifting of spirits to many cancer patients. I call that a real ministry that you have.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, tell us, because I know people want to know, how did you get to where you are today?
It goes back quite a distance. I think I would even start when I was a college student, small liberal arts college in Mississippi, Millsaps College. And like many students in colleges and universities, I was required to take an introductory speech course, the course that not many people take as an elective.
Right.
But if it's required, you take it. And I remember so well some lessons that I learned from that. One was that I noticed some of my fellow students, when it was their time to give their prepared speech, if they had researched the topic well enough, if they knew what they wanted to get across to the audience, if they showed command of the situation and poise and an eagerness to communicate, in that assigned 10 or 12 minutes, not only could they change minds, but they even, in some cases, could change behavior. And to me, I said, this is an incredible tool that we need to learn, all of us, for our personal success and our business advancement, and to serve other people more effectively when we discuss our ideas and our commitments clearly. So that prompted me eventually to go to graduate school, as you mentioned, at Ohio University, where I earned my master's and my doctorate. And then teaching, of course, at the University of Georgia, I was able to translate the jargon that I had learned into the classroom. And I loved watching students advance in their skills. They might be assigned 3 speeches during a term, and the second one was measurably better than the first one, and certainly the third one far better than both. And that's why, in large measure, I eventually became a professional speaker and a speech coach, because as a speech coach, I love finding someone, and it can be executives with some of the major firms that you mentioned, or it can be an entrepreneur, or it can be somebody with experience in between, who knows that they're going to be in many situations where getting their ideas across is essential. And I'm not talking about professional speaking necessarily.
You don't have to have an audience of 10,000.
No, you're going to be leading committee meetings. You're going to be a department head. You're going to be a vice president of an organization. You might be a CEO, or for many of us, you're going into a job interview as a candidate. And if you can go in with communication skills that immediately identify you and connect you with the individual or the committee or both, you have a starting advantage there. So I love teaching speech skills, strategies, tactics at every level.
I love it. Well, it's funny. Over my years, one of the things that I have kind of noticed is people think either everyone is a natural born speaker or they're absolutely terrified of it. And of course, the actuality is we're all kind of in the middle, right? And we all can use our, what we're doing. We can learn from it. We can learn better skills. Whether it's, I remember I was teaching someone how to do on-air interviews. So I was doing some media consulting, and he wiggled back and forth. Da-do, dee-doo, dee-doo. And now I was smart enough to have a camera on him, right? Because he did not believe he did that. And I showed it to him. He was mortified. And he did that because he was nervous, right? So we can all improve our skills. But is somebody just, are most people natural born speakers, or is it something that we really need to learn?
We could talk about whether somebody is a natural born actor or athlete or writer.
True.
And now we're talking about speaking. Some might be born with a little more talent, but that we're not limited, fortunately. And when you talk about you working with clients, and the point I would make that you illustrated so well is you can tell somebody they're doing something, but we have tremendous advantage now, because I tell my clients, my coaching clients, the camera never lies. It tells, our old saying, it tells it like it is. And fortunately, 20 years ago, seeing ourselves on film, we might have to bring in a film crew and pay $5,000.
Do it from our own.
Yes, and got a 5-minute clip. Now we do it so instantly. And seeing yourself the first time think of the first time you ever heard yourself.
Oh, no.
That's not me. No, who is that guy? And then
where did that voice come from?
So both vocally and visually, the wonderful attribute we have now is that we can get that feedback, and this person can argue about they didn't sway, but does that mean the camera was on a
Were
rocky?
you swaying with the camera?
I mean, are we on a lifeboat or what? Why are you moving side to side? So yes, the camera is very important. And here's a point I'd like to emphasize too, that you've already illustrated that you work with top executives and with people at other levels. And even the people that we see on television, they get coaches. Not too long ago, I became acquainted with Domenica Davis. Domenica Davis is a name and a face that's familiar to many of our viewers and listeners. Domenica has been a television meteorologist with major networks for more than 2 decades. And one of the services that Domenica offers now is that she works with meteorologists who maybe are just a couple of years into the business, and she works with them closely on how to become less formal. She tells them, don't try to have a broadcast voice.
Yes. Hello, how are you today?
She talks to them about being conversational. She talks to them about good posture and move. And here's somebody who, if you make it to become a television presenter of any kind, you've got talent, but there's always room for advancement.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's interesting because obviously technology changes made this easier, but it's made it harder. Do you think it's better or worse? So, how much we're on Zoom now, right? Because now we're kind of used to being on camera. And is there a difference between you and I chatting like this and giving a presentation to 2 people to 10,000 people?
There should not be a difference.
Okay.
That's one of the points that I'm happy you're giving me the opportunity to make, because I guess I would say I'm a rebel as far as speech instruction, speech coaching goes. Now let's look at what's traditional. The traditional, and I heard this long ago, even when I was a student, and the traditional was, well, of course, you've got to write out your speech.
Yes.
Got to
Heaven
write it
forbid
out.
you do extemporaneous.
Yeah. Extemporaneous means, of course, you got an idea and you share it. It doesn't have to be in the exact words, but the traditional way, and I still see it, especially, I think, when it comes to what are known as TEDx talks. And they're supposed to have a manuscript that they memorize, and then they regurgitate it before an audience. And then they're not supposed to vary from that. I also see an old style where the speaker is so tied to the manuscript that they're tied to the podium.
Right. They're grasping it for dear life.
I say they're grabbing the podium as though it were a life preserver on the sinking Titanic. They just can't get away from it. So the standard way of teaching, which I oppose, and I have a substitute for it, but the standard way of teaching is you memorize it. It's an essay. It must be in absolute written language, not spoken language. And you're a success if you say that verbatim to your audience. But who needs to be verbatim with an audience? Who needs to memorize a script? Only actors. That's the only people who do. And so what I encourage and teach and coach is what I call a keyword method.
Okay.
And to explain it as briefly as I can, you research a topic just as thoroughly as you would if you were going to write a manuscript. You research it, you outline it, but you have no intent to do anything other than have a lively, almost spontaneous conversation with your audience. And when the only notes that I want one of my coaching students or anybody to take to the lectern and to refer only very occasionally, the only notes are just 4 or 5 keywords which reflect the points they want to get across.
Right.
And many times I've given a 2-hour presentation, and my notes for that, if I weren't using PowerPoint, which many of the times I was not, would be on the back of a business envelope. And I would refer to it now and then. And then one other variation I have, I think the speaker not only shouldn't cling to the podium, but I love to do this myself. And that is to get out and roam among the audience.
Or at least on the stage, be bopping around a bit.
Yes, but if it's possible, you can. I've seen top performers get out, and then what I like to do, and again, that original way would have no audience interaction. But what I like to do is serve as sort of the MC for the occasion. And I will ask my host to have a portable mic, not electric that has to be plugged, battery operated mic. And once I get into the subject and feel I've identified with the audience sufficiently, I'll go around and I'll ask questions.
Right.
And I don't find this uncomfortable for people because we all want to be a part of what's happening, and we learn by participating. So those are some of my keys, and I like to say that the best speaker, whether you're again running a committee or making a sales call or directing a seminar or whatever you're doing, the best speaker is where people forget that you're a speaker.
Yes. They think you're having a conversation.
Yes, that you're having a very lively conversation with them. I've got a lot of coaches who disagree with that, but when I work with people, it's a relief to them to find out that they don't have to cram so many things into their memory. And one other thing I do here, Deb, on a list of tips that I give a coaching client, I say you don't have to be perfect, and I misspell the word perfect. P-U-R-R-F-C-T, and they say, as they look at that, they say, well, you misspelled that. I said, yes, but you got the meaning of it, didn't you? And that gets another point across that perfection is really your enemy. It's not your friend.
Right. Well, I mean, how many times have we seen somebody, and usually it's more of a, and I'm putting this in my air quotes, presentation than, something like a committee meeting or something. But somebody's on the stage and they have their talk memorized.
Yes.
And something happens. Either their brain clicks or a waiter drops a tray or something, and they're gone, right? They have absolutely no idea what to say, what to do. And instead, if they were just doing exactly what you were saying, they would reference what happened, right? Oh my gosh, are you okay? We dropped that tray, right? And then go on. But when we have it memorized, any little thing is going to send us in a totally different direction.
You're right. It breaks our concentration. We probably don't even remember what the main topic was to get back on. I'd like to talk about stage fright a little.
Yes. Because we all get it. You can be in front of 2 people or a bunch.
Now, what I'd first like to say about stage fright is that I want to substitute a word here, because if you go online and you type in stage fright, you'll get many people who tell you how to get rid of stage fright, but I don't do that. I say to my clients, you learn to control your stage fright.
Right.
Why? Because for me and for any speaker who wants to be vital and alive and alert, stage fright is helpful. And I would worry, Deb, if I were going to do any type of presentation, including talking with you today, if I weren't nervous about it.
It kind of raises your adrenaline and
it does. And people can feel that energy. And I sometimes tell my students, that my coaching students, I say, I'd rather have to tame a wild stallion than wake up a sleeping mule.
Right. Right.
Somebody's too boisterous, there's a happy medium there. So that's one thing I say. And in fact, I admit to my own tension, and I would worry if I didn't have it. Deb, when I'm hosting my show, which you've been a guest on, and I'm reading the bio, as you did today for me, and I'm reading that bio, I can look and both of my hands are shaking and the page is shaking. That happens almost, and I would almost worry if it didn't.
Right.
So a couple more pointers. I could give a few more, but a couple of more. Yeah. One is, what your audience is really thinking, Deb? Your audience is thinking, I'm glad he or she is up there talking.
And it's not me.
That's right. I like to put it this way. Many of us make the mistake of thinking, our audiences are so critical. No, they're not. They're your cheerleader. Why?
Right.
Because when the speaker flops, there's great tension in the room, great disappointment. Everybody gets uncomfortable. So they're pulling for you. They're glad they're not up there. And then I go back to what I said about you don't have to be perfect, and get rid of the words delivery. Let's leave delivery to FedEx and the post office.
Because that's a rote type of thing.
That's right. And as one early teacher of rhetoric said, a speech is not an essay standing on its hind legs.
But so many people give their speech like that.
Yes, they do. And I'm sometimes very experienced speakers. I was attending an event about a month ago where there were probably 400 people in the audience, Deb. And the speaker had wonderful credentials. We had a program handed out about how much he'd done on national television. When he's introduced, he walks up to the microphone and he's holding sheets of paper. And I'm thinking, oh, no. But he did. He stuck word for word to those 15 pages of his manuscript. And not surprisingly, many of his listeners at that event, we'd already had our dinner, many got up and left.
Or dozed off or
dozed off or certainly started checking their cell phones.
Right. And there are, you have to, as we kind of go with the flow, right? And I remember when I was in college, I was in a traveling theater group, and we performed every weekend. And the person who coordinated directed, I should say, he wrote everything we did. He wrote the plays that we did. And so, of course, we had scripts, we had that all memorized, but he was also the speech coach. And so he knew that he didn't want us getting up there week after week and just saying the lines like we said them before. So he would change stuff up every single performance. Maybe he completely switched the stage around. Maybe he'd say, you now get to say this and you get to say that. But it kept us on our toes. And, and 99% of it was still the same. But because we were thinking, oh, wait a minute, I was supposed to walk over there and now I'm supposed to walk over here, we would say the line differently. And he was fine with us saying the lines differently because it kept it energized.
Yes, and I had the same situation you did in college because my speech prof was also the theater coach. And getting to your point, I read just in the last day or two about some of the most famous movies that we have seen, some of those that are real classic. The top actors sometimes ad-libbed.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And therefore, the other one had to, the other actors had to respond spontaneously. Let me share this illustration with you, which I read not too long ago. I was, as many people, a Johnny Carson fan. 30 years on late night television, starting in 1962. And he had interesting, really, rules about his guests. One was that he did not want to see or talk with his guests ahead of time. They were in what was called the green room. And then secondly, he would not talk to his guests during commercials.
So no idle chit-chat.
That's right. He would talk to the producer. He would talk to some of the band or whatever, because he explained that he wanted everything that people saw on the air to be spontaneous. And in fact, we mentioned theater, and I love doing collegiate acting as well. And I'm sure your drama coach, speech coach combination, told you about Stanislavski's method called the illusion of the first time.
Right.
That's what you want to give. And the minute I'm hearing a speaker or even an actor or a singer, and I'm thinking, as the saying goes, that they're just phoning it in, they've lost me.
Right. And I think one of the biggest things, and we've kind of been talking about this, is the fact that we have to adapt because things happen. I was giving a presentation one time and I had a heckler. It was a presentation on LinkedIn and I had a heckler.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It was like, holy cow. And I had to stop and deal with him. And I eventually asked him to leave. I mean, and then people applauded. I was like, okay, well, but yeah, things happen. One time I was speaking, and as you can tell, I talk with my hands. I think somewhere I'm Italian, right? And I'm at a podium because I was running the PowerPoint presentation. So I had to be at the podium, but I still would wander and things like that. But I'm talking with my hands. And what do? I bring my glass of water over onto me. I was like, oops. And I looked down and we all laughed, and of course they laughed because I laughed, and I just buttoned my jacket. I mean, and it wasn't anything bad or anything, but I just buttoned my jacket. And, and then I said, this is why I always ask for a bottle of water. Right? So and then the audience, it had been going well, but then all of a sudden I was one of them. Right. And I think that's part of it is when we acknowledge the good and the bad, whatever it is, then we're kind of brought down off of that podium. We might still be up there, but that metaphorical podium, they're like, okay, I like this person.
Well, I get back to my analysis of Johnny Carson. If you or anybody watched Johnny Carson, he capitalized on a mistake.
Oh, he loved it.
When he made a blooper, he would tap the microphone up there, to see what's going on. He'd do a little tap dance. It almost got to the point sometimes you wonder, did he plan this? Right. You talk about interruptions, distractions during your speech. I think the worst one I ever had was a different kind of heckler. I was speaking at an event outdoors in the summer in North Georgia. And as you know, we had a lot of bugs in the state of Georgia in summer. And I had my mouth wide open. Yes, and a bug decided he wanted to go in there. And I instantly sensed that it was one of those hard shell small bugs.
Ew.
Mother and Daddy told me never to spit in front of an audience. So I, without saying a word and nobody knowing it happened, I swallowed the bug. Again, we can't predict what's going to happen, but as you did with the glass of water and Johnny Carson did with his mistakes, the ability to laugh at ourselves shows that we are in control of our emotions and situation. I remember, as would be the case with anybody who's made a lot of presentations, I've made some verbal bloopers. I was emceeing a college event. It was an awards night for the alums of the college. Each year they gave a medallion to 4 of their alums, and naturally, I was emceeing the banquet, and we have a little bio sketch we read. So I had read those pretty carefully at the time. I got up, I read one bio of a lady, and everybody started laughing. And I thought, my gosh, what did I do? Did I use some profanity, my golf course language? What did I do? And when I sat down, somebody told me what I'd done. I was supposed to have said, and thought I had said, that she loved the college so much that she'd written a play about the college in 1955. But instead, I said she wrote a play about the college in 1855.
Oh, dear. You aged her dramatically.
So fortunately, once I found that out and the formal part was over, I went to her, and luckily, we had a good laugh about it.
Well, and she could have turned it into a joke when she got there.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I think that is one of the biggest things is laughter really does, it and it doesn't matter what it is, it reduces that tension. And my favorite Carol Burnett shows were the ones where Harvey and Tim cracked each other up so much they couldn't go on, right?
Yeah.
And now you don't want that with your presentation. You still want to do, but yeah, you can kind of laugh, you can lighten the mood, even if it's a very serious subject. When I talk about cancer, I tell people we have to laugh about this. I mean, I when my doctors want to know what my name is, what is your name and date of birth? I look at them and I smile sweetly and I say, Anastasia Beaverhausen. And and now I don't do that to the new ones, right? Because I don't want them freaking out. But yeah, how can we kind of lighten the mood? And I think that is especially important when we're giving presentations. What can we do? Now, obviously, appropriate humor, folks. We're not, don't, but yeah, I mean, there's so many ways that we can just kind of, do that. I'm one of you guys. I'm not the important paid speaker. That we can do that.
Now, here's a caution, and I agree with you fully. Here's a caution that I give my clients, and that is, don't start your speech with a joke. And I give several reasons for that. First of all, that's a common way to start a speech. You're not doing anything different. You're imitating, and audiences don't want imitators; they want the original. Secondly, because of the internet, it's very likely now that people will have heard the joke.
Right.
And it's probably difficult to tell a joke that hasn't been in some form of social media. We've seen it there. Third, not all of us are skilled at telling a joke. And if the joke bombs,
Oh, yeah. And it's at the very start.
then you have lost your audience, and it's very hard to get them back. And I would say, when you start with an audience, if you have a quip or something, but a canned joke is by now offensive to the audience. It's okay if they're listening to replays of Rodney Dangerfield or somebody else, but the average speaker might take those risks. You can make a humorous remark, and even I remember a self-directed bit of humor that I used one time, and that was when I was invited to speak to a very sizable group in Atlanta. And my host, I think, had heard me before, so it was quite a compliment. And I get there, and I find out that he's not attending. He's gone to South America. So that gave me a great opportunity to say, I was invited by, and I mentioned his name. I said, he wanted to avoid the speech so much, he went to South America. Okay, that's all right. That's self-directed humor. It's not making fun of anybody else. It's not canned. I like to say, with all of our preparation for speaking, let's have it planned, but not canned.
Right.
That's sort of a motto: planned, but not canned.
I love that. And then there's the other things that go along with it, the speech affectations and things. I remember when we moved here from Colorado, I had someone come up to me and he'd been listening to my podcast, and he's a Southern boy. And he says, I love your podcast, but darling, y'all need to slow down. And I realize, and I still, especially as we get excited, right? And as we get, our voice goes up, especially with women, right? But I realize, and so for a year at least, I had a sticky note that was on my computer every time I did a podcast that said, slow down. And then of course we've got and I fall guilty to this all the time, the knows, the ums, the uhs, all of those. So how do you work with people now we don't want to totally get rid of those, because when we do, that comes back to, it sounds like a canned, prepared speech. But how do we not say, and it's funny because when I was looking at your bio and you work with the University of Georgia Athletic Department, that's one of the things, oh my heavens, you get some of these college kids and they will say, or something like that in every single sentence. And pretty soon that's all I'm doing is counting how many times they're saying that. So how do you work with folks to develop that nice, consistent speech pattern?
Again, that's where the camera comes.
Okay.
When you replay and you get them conscious of it. Now, the situation you mentioned, Deb, where you found that you needed to slow down, what we really need to aim for in our presentations is a variety. We don't want to be all the same speed fast. We don't want to be all the same speed slow. And what about, you alluded to this in the first part of our conversation, that our voice is an instrument. And so we don't want to be monotone. A comparison I make. There are 88 keys on the piano. Chopsticks, that little tune that we learned to play as a kid, Chopsticks has something around a dozen keys that it uses. I believe it's about a dozen. Now, if you went to a piano recital and somebody just played chopsticks and nothing else, that was their range, you wouldn't stay very long, would you?
Unless they're just 4 years old.
Yes, you've got all that other range of keys, and the voice is that way too. The voice can be up, as you said, it can be down, it can be very fast, or it can be passionately slow. And think of our voice as widely versatile as a piano keyboard.
Right. I still remember there was a commercial, famous actress, right? And I don't remember who she is or what she was advertising, but if you want to get someone's attention, whisper. Now maybe or maybe not you do that in a presentation, but what you want is something, maybe you want them to be leaning forward. You want them to be thinking, what are they going to say next? Because if you just say, if you want to get somebody's attention, whisper.
Or a good pause. There's this guy named Paul Harvey who did that.
Oh, Paul Harvey was famous for his great pauses.
I've got a bio of Paul Harvey that was written about 3 months after his death. It's a fascinating bio. And he started on radio at age 18. And the first station he was working with fired him because they said he got too slow at times. The second station where he worked, I believe it was in Kansas, this boss called him in after a while and said, these pauses are driving people crazy. You've got to just quit them. And Paul said, I'll do a happy medium. He said, I'm still going to use them, but I will use them periodically. And of course, they had great effect. And getting back to my speech and drama teacher in college, I've always remembered his advice where he said, and of course he did it for exaggeration, but he said, leave out everything but the pauses.
Right. And sometimes they're annoying, right? We all know that William Shatner pauses a little too much. In fact, it's become a running joke, right? That William Shatner just does that. And now I think sometimes he does it on purpose just to be funny. But yeah, you need to watch those things. It like humor, the pause has to be appropriate.
And variety we're talking about variety in our delivery. As you say, you can overdo almost anything. You can overdo being a monotone. You can't even overdo using all of your pitch and time and again. The key here I would really underscore is I would suggest to those who want to really connect with an audience, picture your audience members individually, and you've just happened to see one of them in the grocery store. You're both shopping. And do you worry about exactly what you're going to say? Does it have to be something memorized? Does it have to be perfect? Not at all. And I like this phrase that I heard recently: don't memorize, internalize.
Oh, okay. And I think, the key to what we're saying is it is a conversation.
Yeah.
Whether you are with 2 people or 2,000, you really want to be having that conversation, that fireside chat. Maybe you've got cocktails, coffee, whatever. You want to just be talking to people like you want to be talked to yourself.
I think I want to mention one of the most outstanding contemporary speakers who really does that with an audience, and that's Kat Cole. I had the privilege of hearing Kat Cole quite a few years ago, and her business story is amazing. She started out as a Hooters server in her teens, and by the time she was in her late teens or early 20s, they were sending her to Europe to help other Hooters restaurants get started. So she became the head of Hooters. She became the head of Cinnabon. She became the head of Focus Foods. And in the time that I heard her in person, and I got to meet her afterwards, she told also her personal life story. Her father abandoned the family very early, and she would tell how for 3 weeks she and the other children and the mother had a few canned goods that they could eat. So she had a fascinating, but as she, of course, used no notes, she walked across a rather wide stage. She was always mobile. And everything she said was so vital. And yet I'm thinking, hey, she and I are having coffee together, or we're having a beverage together, and we're just sharing what's happened to us. I would encourage people to go to YouTube, and the cat is with a K, Cat, Cole. Watch some of her videos. She's a grand role model for what I would call lively conversational speaking.
I love that. So who else are some of the people that you would suggest that we check out? We talked about Johnny, we've talked about Paul Harvey, and now Kat. Who else who else would you suggest?
All right. I'm a very big fan of David Muir, who is ABC's anchor at 7:00 each evening. He went to college and started studying broadcast journalism, and right away his professors thought this guy can be a TV anchor someday. So most nights when I'm getting the day wound up, I want to hear David Muir. He's got a wonderful on-camera presence. It's highly professional, and yet you do get the feeling that you're talking to him. So check your ABC station, 7:00 Eastern time. And David Muir is a wonderful example of great diction, but truly connecting with his audience too.
Right. But you just mentioned something that's very important, and that is diction, right?
Yeah.
there's consonants. It was funny, back to the time when I was in college and had this speech professor. There were, and the traveling theater, there were 10 of us maybe that were part of this group that did this. And he kept track. If you did not pronounce words correctly, or if you did not add the consonant at the end, or, all these various things, and then whoever had the worst score, whatever it was, they got to fix dinner for everybody. And, and we learned very quickly that we didn't want to do that. We wanted to be waited on, right? And so we really started watching that. Now, you can get carried away. There's some, I watched Masked Singer, right? I love that show. It's one of the stupid, silly reality shows. And he has a very pronounced, it's, I'm drawing a total blank on who the host is. But he has a very specific, he makes sure that he says everything. And it's actually a little much, like it's Masked Singer is a little much. And so you kind of need to watch that. But, there are, because if you're not speaking clearly enough and people are going, what'd they just say? Then you've lost the battle, right?
There's that happy medium. You remind me of a broadcaster who I thought was way too perfect in it. That was Bill Curtis. I don't know. Remember him, but Bill Curtis, everything was just absolutely perfectly enunciated. I had a fellow one time advise me, don't worry if you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
As long as you got all the syllables in there.
I mean, you got the syllables.
Right. And again, folks, record yourself. Yes, it is painful to watch. And do I go back? No. If I went back and especially some of the earlier I wouldn't do them again. But
I tell people that I started producing instructional videos on YouTube in the year 2007, and I'm next to say, please don't go back and watch any of them.
Mm-hmm. Right. But the key is we have learned from those, right? We've learned, like I said, to talk a little slower, all those various things. And that is what's important, is what are we learning from it and what works? Because I also know if I go too slow, then it gets boring. Or more importantly, if I go too slow, my train of thought might go squirrel, right? And but it needs to be, you need to be able to be thinking, okay, this is what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm doing, and not get yourself sidetracked, which on occasion is hard for me. But yeah, and I keep coming back to it. It has to be conversational. How am I going to talk with my friends? Sometimes I'm going to talk with my friends if I'm going to get really excited and my voice goes up and, all those various things. Or I want to really make sure that they're paying attention to me because what I'm saying is very important.
I want to underscore something else, and that is, and this has to do with our attitude when we're speaking. There's 3 things that we can be concentrating on. One is the audience. Second one is the message. And the third is ourselves. What impression are we making? And if you start at all, even for a second, worrying about the impression you're making, you've forgotten your goal. Your goal is to take that message and share it with the audience in a lively and meaningful and helpful way.
Right. Yeah, because if I start thinking, am I saying too much? Am I saying too much? Then that's all that is stuck in my head is don't say don't say and then I go, but yeah, it's okay if I say as long as I'm getting that message out there.
Yes. Wasn't it Victor Hugo who said, every excess is its own undoing? So we don't want any habit that signifies us. I've got one speaker that I hear constantly, and he's got one word that he repeats 4 or 5 times with the audience in the form of a question. And if you're going to ask the audience a question, which we should, have various ways of phrasing them, not the same every time. Sameness kills presentations, doesn't it?
Right, right. And there are people like me who start focusing just on that. When's he going to say that word again? Oh my gosh, he's going to, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I pay no attention to what they're saying because I'm waiting for whatever that is.
Well, they shouldn't be distracting us. It's really not our fault. They're distracting.
Yeah. So, I've had guests on before, and because I think this is very important, on why it's important for business leaders to be a guest on a podcast. Exactly what we're doing right here. But one of the biggest things is people, they've got their message, they know what they want to talk about, but they don't know how to be that guest on that podcast. You have that camera presence. And I don't know if it's better or worse that we're now, we talk about Zoom fatigue, right? We're on Zoom so much that we don't pay attention. But, even if somebody is just listening to the podcast, as and we record this as audio and video, how can someone be that good guest?
When they're invited to be a guest on the podcast, there are quite a few steps that I recommend to my guests, and I'm sure you saw these, a list of them when I was prepping you to be my guest. One is to make sure that all of the technical equipment is working well.
Right.
Test your microphone, test your camera, test the lighting. And in the invitation that I send to a potential guest, I say, please have pets removed from your area because we all love our pets. Yes, but
They don't need to be walking across in front of your presentation.
We don't need to be hearing, oh, wait, I've got to take my dog out for a minute. Or so get rid of distractions. And here's a tip I would give anyone who's going to be a guest or a host. I started this years ago. I've been hosting a podcast for 8 years. And each time, and many of us work out of a home office, each time on the 2 doors that come into my house, I tape a little 1-page sign that says video recording in progress. Please do not disturb things. So
I have a thing that says on air.
And we should do that because delivery people or the friendly neighbor or whatever people can drop in, and we want them to under other circumstances. And then when you're going to be a guest on a podcast, go back to the main theme we've underscored, and that is be ready to have a conversation with your host.
Right.
Don't come in with 12 points you want to make and just stick to it and be flexible. Be flexible because in a real lively show of any kind, I send my guests, as you know, Deb, sample questions. But I say these are only samples. They got us started. But in a conversation, you're really open to a lot more. So another thing to guest is be very flexible. And then this point, I think, needs to be there too. Don't be too self-promotional. You usually have an opportunity in the program to give your ID and talk about maybe your books or your services. That's standard. But don't start off with that. And Deb was very kind to read an introduction, which talked about my credentials, but we don't mention them during the show. So the person who gets too self-promotional, those are the programs that, if you go back and look, they were listened to for 7 minutes,
Right.
instead of an hour.
Right. And I tell people one of the best things you can do to prepare for your interview is go see other or watch, listen, whatever, to other interviews that the host has done.
Yeah.
And I try and do that because then I know, okay, here's the flow. Here's kind of what they're going to do. And plus, kind of strokes the ego when you say, hey, I listened to several of your programs. I really like the one you did with so-and-so, whatever it is. But then it does kind of get you into that, and there are, and folks, please follow the instructions from the host or whoever is sending you the information. If they say, we want you on 15 minutes early so you can test your camera or whatever, then do that. I don't care if you just did 4 other interviews, follow all of that. And, one of the biggest things I've had people who have said, I don't need to do that. I know what I'm doing. Well, and then
You want to say I don't need to host you.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And then usually there are issues, and you talk about technology and equipment. I upgraded my camera because I want my head to be the same size approximately as yours. And so I can actually change the zoom of my camera. And so for those of you who are listening, you don't get to enjoy this because this is great fun. So I can zoom this in because maybe the person I'm talking to is a little bit closer. Now, this is way too close. They don't need to see my nose hairs. And this is too far away, right? And so that is the place where I typically set my camera. The camera was under $100. There are simple things that you can do. And then, of course, you need to know your subject matter. But I can always tell when my guests are reading things and I'm like, oh, no.
It's deadly. It's deadly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then...
Yes, and the background. The background is important.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I would have to mention, we haven't talked about the clothing. We certainly are not in the required suit and tie and the ladies in heels as we would have been in the 1960s.
I got my heels on. What are you saying?
But I don't think somebody needs to come in wearing a T-shirt with a logo on it.
Or bad words. I had that one time. I'm like, Right.
So what we want is to minimize distractions. We want the guest and the host to have the full attention without a dog barking or you and I certainly cut off our phones ahead of time. That's a key. Reminds me of one time at the beginning of my speaking career, Deb, I had my host tell the audience, cut off the phones. This was when cell phones were just coming into vogue. But about 10 minutes into it, one idiot's phone went off, and it was mine.
Oh, no. Oh.
And I often tell that story to my guests as a point, and this is before we go into recording, that anybody can forget it, but we're not going to forget it now. We're going to cut those phones off.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just going to make it practice. I went to a presentation yesterday, and the person was, she was getting ready to introduce the guest, and she said, wait, we have a game. Everyone take out your cell phones. Of course, every single person there took out their cell phone. She said, now turn it off. And did people turn it off? No, but at least we muted and did all of those things. So, but yeah, it was really funny. Well, Dr. Bill, oh my gosh, we are almost at the top of the hour, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface on this. So we will definitely have you on again because, as I said, you are just a delight. And more importantly, you have such great information that everybody can learn from. Because we all, at some point or time, have to give a presentation. Maybe you're trying to convince your kids that they've got to do the laundry, or you're trying to get massive funding from investors. Whatever it is, what you're talking about is such an important skill. But until then, if somebody wants to know a little bit more about you, how do they find you, and what are the services that you provide?
The easiest spot would go to my website, which is, since my tagline is Biz Communication Guy, my website is bizcommunicationguy.com. While you're on my website, you can subscribe to my podcast, which is weekly. Deb's been on there. It's the Biz Communication Show. My phone number, and I'm happy to hear from anyone who wants to talk about their communication challenges and problems, and also their goals, what they would like to achieve, and we could have an initial phone conversation with no financial involvement. My phone number is 678-316-4300. And then I will mention YouTube, because that's a place I share many tips and strategies. And as you know, it's our favorite word. It's free. And you can find my YouTube channel, Bill Lampton, Ph.D. And I invite you, when you get there, to subscribe. It's been a great pleasure to talk with Deb, who told me at the outset that she has hosted more than 1,000 shows. So that's 1,000 guests whose knowledge she's been able to share with people. She said, I believe you said 30% of your listeners are international. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a wonderful pleasure to be on here. And as far as my services, almost 30 years, have been a professional speaker, a speech coach, and a business communication consultant for organizations. And we'd be happy to talk with you about that. Oh, one more item, Deb. We talked about stage fright considerably. I have a very brief book on Amazon that I encourage you to purchase. And the title is 25 Ways to Control Your Stage Fright and Become a Highly Effective Speaker. And notice, as Deb and I discussed, I didn't say get rid of your stage fright. 25 ways to control your stage fright and become a highly effective speaker. I believe you would learn, get reinforcement of what we said, and learn some other tips about how to become that speaker who's poised and persuasive.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Bill, such great information. And I encourage folks to go to your website, because there's, just a treasure trove of fabulous information. All your links, all those things are there. And we will have you on again, because I think this is something that we can just continually keep working with people on, because more and more we're having conversations on Zoom. We're giving presentations, webinars on Zoom. We are getting back to giving in-person presentations, all of those things. So I think it would be fabulous to have you on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
One final thought would be that when I was in high school and college, I was the guy who always sat in the back row because I did not want the teacher to call on me. I was very timid about getting up before a group. So if you're in that situation, there are many prominent professionals. In fact, Mark Twain, I remember so well, in a biography of Mark Twain, he, of course, became famous as a lecturer on what was known as the Chautauqua Circuit. And in San Francisco, his first presentation, he came out on the stage, packed audience, and it took him a minute and a half before he could say anything. So it doesn't really matter where you started or how far you've come. There's always an opportunity for advancement. And I assure you, I'm working every day to advance my own skills.
We can always learn. And this has been so much fun. I'm Deb Krier. I've been chatting with the absolute delightful Biz Communication Guy, Dr. Bill Lampton. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Krier, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.